The air shimmered with the heat of early summer, the scent of chlorine sharp and familiar as it danced with the sweetness of sunscreen. Children's laughter rang out, echoing across the community pool like the soundtrack of a perfect afternoon. Bright inflatables bobbed gently on the water's surface, and parents lounged beneath umbrellas, their conversations drifting lazily between school updates and weekend plans. Jake leaned back in his chair, sipping from a sweating can of iced tea, eyes on his daughter Emily as she tried to cannonball with all the power her 6-year-old legs could muster. Water erupted around her in a triumphant splash, and she surfaced with a victorious grin, wiping strands of wet hair from her eyes. Jake smiled, heart light. After a stressful work week, this was exactly what they both needed. Then a voice, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the peace. "Absolutely not! No jumping into the pool! Are you people animals?" The pool stilled. Emily froze mid-giggle, shrinking slightly under the sudden scrutiny. Jake sat up, muscles tightening with recognition. There she was, Karen, hair styled into a rigid helmet of blonde curls, mirrored sunglasses perched on her nose like some royal insignia, and a clipboard hugged tightly to her chest, as if she were the gatekeeper of suburban order. She stood at the edge of the shallow end, casting a shadow that seemed colder than the water. "You!" she snapped, pointing at a boy who looked no older than 8. "You just splashed me. Do you have any respect?" The boy stammered, backing up. A woman, his mother, rushed over, placing herself between her son and the approaching storm. Karen waved her clipboard. "There are rules. You don't get to just do whatever you want. This is a community pool, not a playground for your misbehaving brats." Jake stood, moving quickly toward Emily. Her lips were trembling now, her joy erased in a flash. He crouched beside her. "You okay, baby?" She nodded, barely. Her eyes flicked back toward Karen, who was now circling the pool like a shark in open water. "This isn't the first time," a voice said beside him. It was Alan, another dad from down the block. He had twin boys who were currently clinging to the side of the pool, clearly too nervous to continue playing. "Last week she told my kids they'd be banned if they brought toys in. Rubber ducks. Rubber ducks, Jake." Jake's jaw clenched. Karen had always been a pain, hovering around HOA meetings, volunteering for committees just to boss people around. But this was different. This wasn't about lawn heights or mailbox paint colors. This was kids. Their kids. He stood and walked toward her, measured but firm. She turned as he approached, her lip already curled. "Karen," he said, keeping his voice calm, "you need to stop yelling at the kids. They're not doing anything wrong." "They're violating safety protocols," she snapped, tapping her clipboard for emphasis. "There's no running, no jumping, no food. Do you see that juice box? That's a liability." "That's my daughter's juice box." "Then maybe you should teach her some manners. Or is that too much for a man like you?" Jake blinked, stunned by the venom in her tone. His fists tightened at his sides. "They're just kids," he said slowly, trying to stay composed. "It's a pool. They're playing. You don't get to make them cry over made-up rules." Karen straightened, as if absorbing energy from the confrontation. "Excuse me? I'm the acting safety liaison for this facility." "Appointed by who?" she smirked. "Let's just say I have connections. If you don't like it, maybe find a different pool. One more suitable for certain types of people." Jake caught the implication and took a step forward, before forcing himself to stop. His voice dropped lower. "You're out of line. Say what you want to me, but you don't talk to my daughter or anyone else's kid like that again." Karen leaned in, voice sugary and cruel. "Maybe if you were a better parent, You wouldn't have to worry about someone else correcting your child. Jake stared at her, stunned by the audacity, by the sheer joy she seemed to take in asserting control. He turned and walked away, not because he was backing down, but because he knew that if he didn't, he might say something he couldn't take back. Emily looked up at him with big, questioning eyes. He put an arm around her. "Let's go home, sweetie." They passed Alan on the way out. "You good?" the man asked. Jake didn't answer, not directly. He just said, "This isn't over." That night, Jake sat at the kitchen table. Laptop open, fingers drumming against the keys. Emily was asleep upstairs, but he couldn't shake the image of her face, confused, hurt, robbed of joy. He pulled up the neighborhood's Facebook group and began reading. The posts were buried, spread, out over months, but the stories lined up. Does anyone know if Karen's allowed to film children at the pool? Karen called the cops on my husband because she thought he looked too young to be a parent. She yelled at my 4-year-old for having a pool noodle. A pool noodle. Why is she always at the pool? Doesn't she work? Jake scrolled, horrified and fascinated. Comment after comment. Karen had terrorized the pool for over a year, but always just shy of something reportable, always with just enough fake authority to intimidate. He created a new post. "Karen made my daughter cry today by screaming at her in front of everyone. Enough is enough. Who else has had issues?" Replies poured in. Jake's phone buzzed with notifications as the stories came in. Parents were angry, but more than that, they were exhausted. No one had pushed back because Karen always made it seem like she was the authority. Jake typed again. "Then maybe it's time we push back. Properly." A new reply blinked into view. "She's close with the HOA president. They'll just cover for her." Jake stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled grimly. "Good thing I know someone better." It was only a few words, but they were enough to start something, and Karen had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Jake was waiting outside the HOA office the moment it opened. He had barely slept, his mind racing with fragments of Karen's sneer and Emily's tear-filled eyes. A few other parents had messaged him late into the night, sharing screenshots, blurry phone videos, and furious paragraphs about what Karen had done to their children. The floodgates had opened. Now it was time to make it official. The HOA receptionist, a woman named Trina who had the glazed-over look of someone long resigned to suburban politics, greeted him with a weak smile. Jake handed over a folder, 30 pages of printed complaints, incident photos, and a letter signed by 16 other parents. Trina flipped through the first few pages, her eyes widening. "This is about Karen, isn't it?" Jake nodded. "She's not on the board, not a pool employee, not even a volunteer. But she's running that place like a private fiefdom." Trina gave a small, bitter laugh. "You're not wrong, but—" She lowered her voice. "She's close with Bill." Bill, the HOA president. They're friendly. She was his campaign manager. If you can even call passing out flyers a campaign. Jake's stomach turned. "So if I submit this, what happens?" Trina sighed. "Officially, they have to review it at the next meeting. Unofficially?" She glanced around. "He'll probably lose the paperwork." Jake left the office frustrated but unsurprised. Every time Karen crossed a line, there was someone in the background looking the other way. She played just clean enough to keep consequences at bay. That evening, Jake sat on his porch as Rachel pulled up. His older sister was still in her suit. From work, heels clicking on the pavement as she approached, legal pad already in hand. "Got your message," she said, sitting beside him. "Let me guess. Crazy neighbor drama?" He handed her a drink and told her everything. Rachel listened in silence, only interrupting once to clarify what exactly Karen had said to Emily. She told her to go home and that she wasn't welcome. "At the pool," Jake said. "My 6-year-old. Rachel's jaw tightened. "So she's impersonating an HOA official and harassing children in a community space. Sounds like we've got ourselves a nice little violation sandwich." Jake smiled, faintly. "Can you do anything about it?" Rachel flipped open her legal pad. "Well, first, we confirm her status. Is she a homeowner?" Jake blinked. "She lives in that white house on Birchwood, right?" Rachel tapped on her phone. "Let's see." She scrolled, her expression unreadable. Then she smirked. "Nope. Property's owned by Jeffrey Halverson. Mortgage still in his name. Karen's not listed anywhere. She's not on the deed, not on a lease. Hell, she doesn't even show up on the utilities." Jake laughed, in disbelief. "She doesn't even live here officially?" "Which means," Rachel said, "she's technically a guest. And if she's issuing threats, filing false reports, or creating a hostile environment, the HOA can be liable for letting her act in an unofficial capacity. That clipboard? It's a prop." The next weekend, things escalated. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Jake got the text. She just shut down Ava's party. "Come now." He grabbed his keys and rushed to the pool. By the time he arrived, the damage was done. Ava's birthday, her 7th, had been scheduled for weeks. The decorations were simple, just a few balloons tied to the pool gate and a picnic table covered with paper plates and juice boxes. But Karen had stormed in like a health inspector on a warpath. She accused the parents of violating food ordinances, demanded proof of a reservation no one had ever needed before, and called the decorations a fire hazard. Ava was crying. Her mom was on the verge of tears. Karen stood nearby, arms folded, chin raised in triumph. Jake approached, heart pounding. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he asked, voice low and furious. Karen turned slowly. "Excuse me? You bullied a 7-year-old. You tore down decorations. You threatened to call the cops over a juice box," Karen scoffed. Maybe if her parents had read the regulations. There are no regulations. You made them up. Then maybe you should talk to Bill. He and I are quite aligned on what's best for this community." Jake narrowed his eyes. "Funny you say that, because I just spoke to someone who actually reads the bylaws." Karen faltered for a moment. Just a flicker. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jake, and you've been getting away with this for way too long." Later that night, Jake and Rachel went through the HOA documents together. Rachel highlighted the relevant sections. All complaints must be submitted by current homeowners. Non-residents may be banned from amenities at the board's discretion. No individual shall enforce community rules without express board appointment. Karen violated all 3. Jake leaned back, mind buzzing. "So we take this to the board?" Rachel shook her head. "No, we don't just tell them. We show them. We need proof, video, witnesses, everything." Jake hesitated. "What if they ignore it? Then we go public. Neighborhood forum, social media. Hell, I'll host a town hall in your driveway. We force their hand. But we need her on record." Jake nodded. "Let's give her the rope." The next morning, a post appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group. It was from a new account. No photo, no identifying info. "Is Karen officially authorized to enforce pool rules? Just asking before I file a complaint." Karen responded within minutes. "I am absolutely within my rights as acting liaison. If anyone questions that, they can take it up with the board. I won't tolerate disrespect." Jake smiled as he read the words. She just lied. In writing. Rachel nodded. And we're just getting started. Karen had made one mistake too many. And for the first time, the parents weren't afraid. They were planning, watching, waiting. And Karen? She was, already standing on the trapdoor. By midweek, the plan was fully in motion. Rachel drafted a formal complaint letter that cited multiple violations of HOA bylaws and state-level trespassing statutes, each point supported by screenshots, timestamps, and witness statements from parents. Jake compiled the video footage parents had sent him. Grainy, yes, but damning nonetheless. In one clip, Karen could be heard shouting, "I run this pool," as a child recoiled from her waving clipboard. In another, she threatened to have a father banned for life for questioning her authority. The videos alone might not have been enough, but paired with the paperwork Rachel uncovered, Karen's lack of residency, the absence of any formal appointment, and her own public admission that she was acting liaison, they had enough to paint a clear picture. Karen was a fraud, with a god complex. Still, Jake knew the real battle would be psychological. Karen didn't rely on actual authority. She thrived on fear, on compliance. That meant her power could be undone not just by paperwork, but by public spectacle. On Friday, the pool was crowded again. The weather was perfect. Kids laughed and splashed, reclaiming the space with cautious joy. Jake had spent the morning setting up a barbecue at the far end, flanked by a table of snacks and drinks donated by supportive parents. Rachel stood nearby with her phone in one hand and a copy of the community bylaws in the other. Karen showed up like clockwork. She always did. This time, though, her arrival wasn't met with fearful glances or tense silence. Instead, the parents looked at her the way one might watch an actor take the stage, expecting a performance, ready for the final act. She stormed toward the grill. "Who authorized this?" she demanded, voice rising over the laughter and music. "There's no permit. You can't serve food this close to the water." Jake looked up, calm. "We're allowed to use the space. It's all in the HOA's public guidelines." He nodded to Rachel, who stepped forward with the document. Section 6, subsection C. Karen barely glanced at the paper. "I don't care what you think you found. I make the calls here." Jake gave her a cool, measured smile. "No, Karen. You pretend to make the calls. But we've checked. You're not on the board. You're not on any committee. And you don't even own a home here." Karen's face twitched. "That's none of your business. It is when you harass residents at a public amenity you have no authority to manage. And it gets worse." Jake turned toward the growing crowd. "She doesn't just show up and yell. She threatens kids. She bullies parents. She tears down decorations and calls people names, all while pretending she's in charge." A hush fell over the area. The tension was no longer fear. It was anticipation. "Lies!" Karen snapped. "You're twisting everything." Rachel stepped forward. "Actually, you admitted it yourself. Online, on record. We've got screenshots. You've impersonated an HOA official repeatedly, enforced fake rules, and created a hostile environment for families. And since you're not even a legal resident of this neighborhood, you're technically trespassing every time you assert authority over this space." Karen looked between them, eyes narrowing. "You don't scare me." "Good," Jake said, "because the real scare is coming." He pulled out his phone. "Bill's here, by the way." Karen spun around, startled. The HOA president, Bill, had indeed arrived, drawn by the sudden crowd and chatter. He looked flustered, like a man who'd expected to be praised, and instead walked into a courtroom. "Bill," Jake said, loud enough for the crowd, We filed a formal complaint. You received it, right? Bill hesitated. I'm reviewing it. Great. Because it names Karen as the root of multiple violations, and it includes community signatures, footage, and her own online admission of fraud. That's enough to call an emergency board vote, correct? Bill's eyes flicked toward Karen. She looked pale now, lips drawn into a tight line. There's protocol, he mumbled. Rachel stepped in. We've already contacted the HOA's Regional Oversight Office. They're aware that this board has failed to act on multiple written complaints. If you stall now, Bill, it's not just Karen who's going to be held accountable. Bill turned even paler. Karen was no longer glaring. She was backing away, mouth open in silent protest. Then Jake did something unexpected. He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. She's not banned, not yet, but you all deserve to know. She doesn't speak for anyone here. So from this point forward, if she gives you orders, if she threatens your kids, if she shows up with that clipboard, ignore her. Don't argue. Just walk away. Document it. Send it to us. We'll take care. Of the rest? The crowd murmured in agreement. Someone clapped, then another. Soon, the entire pool area broke into applause, not wild or dramatic, but pointed. Karen stood alone, the sound wrapping around her like a verdict. For a moment, she seemed to be calculating some final move. But the math no longer worked in her favor. She turned without another word and stalked off, clutching her clipboard like a broken shield. Jake exhaled deeply. She's not gone yet, Rachel murmured beside him. But her illusion of control, he said. That's shattered. And it was. For the first time in over a year, the pool belonged to the families again. Kids laughed freely. Parents relaxed. And somewhere beyond the laughter and splashing water, Karen was realizing something she never thought possible. People weren't afraid of her anymore. But the real consequence was still to come. Because Jake and Rachel weren't done. Not yet. It began quietly. Karen disappeared from the pool for 3 days. Some thought she had finally taken the hint. Others weren't so sure. Jake knew better. People like her didn't vanish. They regrouped, recalibrated, retaliated. Sure enough, on the 4th day, she returned. But not with a clipboard this time, with a lawyer. It happened during a community cleanup event Jake had helped organize. Kids were picking up trash. Music played over a Bluetooth speaker, and the energy was lighthearted. Until the black SUV pulled up. Karen emerged in oversized sunglasses and a beige pantsuit that didn't suit the humid weather. Beside her walked a short, bald man in a navy tie, holding a leather portfolio and wearing the smug expression of someone who believed paperwork equaled power. Karen made a beeline for Jake, who was bagging mulch with Emily. "You're being served," she declared, dropping a packet of documents at his feet. Emily shrank behind her father, clutching his leg. Jake bent down, picked up the envelope, and glanced over the top page. Cease and desist. Defamation. Harassment. He chuckled, quietly. At first, then louder. Karen blinked. "You think this scares me?" Jake said. "After what you did to our kids?" Her lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Owens, my client has been the target of an organized slander campaign. We are prepared to escalate this." Rachel's voice cut him off like a scalpel. "Oh, please." She stepped between them, holding her own stack of documents. "You're about to represent a woman impersonating an HOA official without any legal standing. That's criminal impersonation, by the way. And if you're foolish enough to take this to court, I'll make sure the countersuit includes every parent here as a co-plaintiff." Karen's lawyer faltered. "Ma'am, I'm not here to argue." "Good," Rachel said. Because you don't have a case. You have a walking PR disaster. Jake handed the envelope back. Tell your client we're not afraid. Tell her the board is holding an emergency vote in 2 days, and this time the community will be there. Karen's jaw clenched. I still have influence. Rachel didn't even blink. Then use it, because this ends soon. And when it does, you'll wish all we did was call you out online. Word spread fast. The HOA forum lit up with debates, arguments, screenshots, and memes. One even featured Karen's face edited onto a lifeguard tower with the caption, "Not today, clipboard queen." By the day of the vote, the clubhouse was packed. Jake stood near the back with Rachel, arms crossed as the board assembled at the long table in front. Bill looked pale again, sweating through his collar. The murmur in the room faded when Karen's entered, walking slowly, as though daring someone to boo. No one did. The silence said more. Bill cleared his throat. We are here to discuss allegations against a non-resident, Karen Whitley, who has acted in an unofficial capacity at the community pool. The board has received a formal petition signed by 37 residents, citing impersonation, harassment, and multiple code violations. Karen raised a hand. Before you vote, I have something to say. Jake tensed, but Rachel placed a hand on his arm. Let her speak, she whispered. It's her last gasp. Karen walked to the front. Her voice trembled at first, then sharpened like glass. Yes, I enforced rules. Because no one else would. You people let your children run wild. You ignore safety. And when someone finally steps in, you call it harassment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but she pressed on. This neighborhood used to mean something. It used to be clean, orderly, respectable. Now it's chaos. All because some parents couldn't handle a little discipline. Jake stepped forward. You didn't discipline, Karen. You terrorized. You bullied. You made kids cry, tore down birthday parties, and tried to scare everyone into silence. But we saw through you. And now, it's over. Bill nodded slowly. The board has reviewed the evidence. Karen Whitley is not a homeowner. She is not on the HOA board or any sanctioned committee. Effective immediately, she is banned from using all community amenities. Any attempt to return without permission will be treated as trespassing. Gasps echoed. A few people clapped, then more joined in. The room erupted in a wave of applause, not for vengeance, but for justice long overdue. Karen stood frozen, her face unreadable. She turned slowly, her posture rigid, and walked out without a word. Outside, as people spilled from the building, laughter and relief danced on their faces. Jake crouched to hug Emily, who grinned up at him with wide eyes. Did we win? She asked. He smiled. We did, sweetheart. We really did. Rachel approached, slipping her sunglasses on. She'll probably threaten another lawsuit, she said. Might even post a few rants online. But her power's gone, Jake nodded. Because we stood together. As they walked toward the car, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced down. TE was a message in the community group. Anyone else think we should rename the pool? Something like Karen-Free Zone? He laughed out loud and showed it to Rachel. Think they'll go for it? Honestly, she said, smirking, I think it's already unofficially done. And just like that, the neighborhood felt new again. Not perfect, but reclaimed. A place where kids could play without fear, where parents spoke up, where one man with a daughter and a spine had rallied a whole community. Karen might have strutted in with threats and rules, but she left with nothing but a broken clipboard and a neighborhood that would never forget her name, for all the wrong. reasons. And as for Jake, he didn't just win a petty war, he protected his daughter. He gave the voiceless a voice, and that made him the real lifeguard of the summer.